And I would yield to my friend from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
I think it's all been said. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Chairman, this bill passed by unanimous consent in the Senate August 1st, so there's like no objection in a Senate controlled by Democrats, and now we're looking to pass it, and the Democrats in the House are objecting to it. And I think this is just, just by definition, if you looked up Trump derangement syndrome in the dictionary, I think this would be a pretty good example of it.
Would the gentleman yield?
Chair, I yield. No, sorry. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, because I have great respect for you, Mr. Scott. So I'm just suggesting here, let's have an intellectually honest debate. Mr. Roy said it best. We are where we are, right? But spare me these, and it's not your reference, but Mr. Langworthy made this notion of, well, the judicial system is facing a crisis and a backlog and all the rest. Yes, there are many of us who've been working on it for the better part of the last 18 months who were begging House Republicans and the chairman and others to take this legislation as the Senate had asked. And so now to pretend as though the reasoning that the ranking member articulated is, I get that you disagree with it, but at least concede. You understand the senators have said explicitly they hoped that the House would take this up before the election for this precise reason. That's all I'm suggesting.
The bill was introduced, I mean, this says January, February, March, April 19th of 2024.
Correct.
Well, that's not 18 months ago. This is kind of record speed for a piece of legislation getting done over the last 10 years when you get right down to it. I mean,
in any event, I yield back.
Well, but I would just, if I could, to the gentleman from Georgia.
It passed by unanimous consent in a Democratic-controlled Senate, and it's the same language. If we had changed the language, I would understand the objection, but I don't understand.
I mean, the alternative, if I could, that the ranking member put forward is, now we got to wait another 4 years.
That's exactly right.
We got to wait another 4 years.
But how many of the judges will be appointed over the next 4 years?
So Mr. Scott?
How many are appointed over the next 4 years?
22.
With the gentleman.
Mr. Scott?
Yeah.
The fact is that
Mr.
everyone.
Neguse. I was yielding to Mr. Neguse.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. I guess the only question then is it your position, do you honestly believe that no Republicans were essentially trying to ensure this legislation was not considered before the election, that it was a total coincidence that essentially the legislation passed in the Senate intentionally before the election with the understanding that the House needed to pass this before the election, but that House Republicans, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush here, but that essentially it was the position of the Republicans that they didn't take up this legislation. It was a total coincidence, and now the election is over, we're going to take it up. That's your position? I mean, let's just be honest.
I think we would be taking up the legislation regardless of who won the election. It's just a difference of opinion. And so, Madam Chair, I yield.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Scott. And with that, I thank you very much for appearing before us